Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to the first day of our series of FRC business workshops. Um, I'm so excited to have you here. My name is Tanvi, and I'm the business captain for the Robostangs, and I'm going to start off this session by giving some background information about our team. So we've been the impact winners at districts and state level for pretty consistently for the past couple of years. And we're really excited to share what we've learned to hopefully give you guys some new ideas to implement in your teams. Our goal is for you guys to use our information and implement it in your team. So please stay in contact with us. We would love to keep talking to you guys throughout the year and throughout the season. This QR code right here, like I said before, is to let us know that you are here. So please give it a scan and we can send out this presentation to you. We're also going to be putting our whole presentation on YouTube. So you'll have that as an access point too. Today's workshop is going to be for awards, and we have our awards lead right here, Opal, if you want to give a wave. So I'm going to be giving it to Opal to kick off the meeting, but I do ask if you guys could all turn on your cameras to make it more of an engaging workshop. That would be amazing. And I'm going to hand it off. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone. As Thunby mentions, I'm Opal and I'm the awards lead for this season. We're just going to introduce the rest of our presenters.
Hi guys, I'm Nishi.
I'm Momsi.
And I'm Jasper.
Okay, so first, our schedule for today is we're going to start with our presentation that we crafted, and then we're going to move into a Q&A session, which is going to be interactive. So any questions you guys have, you guys can ask us. And basically today we're going to go over how our team approaches awards in FIRST, and through that we're going to talk about topics like impact, judges' resources, PIP presenting, and more. We encourage you guys to ask questions during the couple of question breaks that we have throughout the presentation, and those can be questions that pertains to you specifically, that pertains to your team, or anything that we've said that may have confused you. Without further ado, we're going to move into what we're going to cover. We're going to first start with an awards breakdown, so that's going to be like the gist of all PIT awards. So when we first were thinking of this workshop, we were like, there are, I think, around 10 PIT awards that you can win other than impact. And so we were wondering, how are we going to approach this? How are we going to tell people about it? And we thought the most effective way to do that is to teach you guys a strategy that you can use and apply to every single one of those awards. So the first step for this is going to be going online and finding the award criteria. If you search up FIRST awards, you'll be able to find the awards that are awarded during these competitions, and they're going to be broken up into two categories. That's going to be PIT awards and impact. And then within PIT, you're going to have team attribute awards. That's going to be business awards. And then you're going to have robot attribute awards. And those are going to be awards that you win off of your robot. So once you finish and find those awards criteria, we suggest you make a document and you list every single thing that your team does that pertains towards that piece of criteria. So I have one example here that I made earlier this year for the Engineering Inspiration Award. And so as you can see, there's around like 5 pieces of criteria that is listed on the FIRST website. And under each piece of criteria, we listed what exactly we did as a team that could pertain to that piece of criteria. This is super duper helpful. So because one, it helps you understand what exactly your team does and how it fits into FIRST and the awards you're targeting. Secondly, it also helps, especially if you do this in off season, helps your team make a conscious effort to improve before competition season starts. So for example, let's say you're looking at the Sustainability Award and you notice that your team doesn't do a lot with a specific piece of criteria. That's a piece of feedback that you can give your team and you can make a conscious effort to improve upon before the season starts or throughout the season. So that way, by the time you get to the actual competition, you now have something you can write under that criteria. This is also really helpful during PIT presenting, and we do recommend PIT presenters do these just because these specific awards are the most helpful for that. Now we're going to move into the Rookie Awards.
So in the Rookie Awards, there are 2 awards. The first one is called the Rookie Inspiration Award, and the second one is called the Rookie All-Star Award. In the Rookie Inspiration Award, judges are looking for you to show that you can recruit new students, that you're providing to different types of communities, and you have continuation and first everywhere. So some ways you guys could try getting this award is having stats on members. This really helps with the first and third um criterias because it really allows you to show that you are growing as a team and that your students do want to continue STEM in college. And for the second one, I would just try making different events. So one event that we did was Girl Scouts, but there are also different types of events you could do, like booths at STEAM fairs and different stuff like that. And then make sure at every single of your events, you're talking about the core values of FIRST so that judges and your attendees know what FIRST is all about. And then the second one, Rookie All-Star Award. For this one, you want to be working at a First Impact Team Award like level, having connection to schools, sponsors, organization, understanding first, and making sure that your robot is made with the challenge in mind. Some ways you guys can do this is showing team spirit, community activities again, which is a really big part of FIRST. And for sponsors, we'll talk more about that in our finance workshop. But try talking to your school, try emailing businesses around you, going in person, calling them. And for understanding first, make sure to have fun along the way and make sure it's not just about winning the award, it's also about understanding what first is all about.
Okay, we'll move on to the Dean's List Award. So, like I said earlier, I'm Jasper. If you guys obviously don't know me, but I was our team's Dean's List candidate for the last season, and I was also lucky enough to win it at our regional competition as well. So, the Dean's List Award is an award that recognizes a student's leadership and dedication to both FIRST and their team. It's available to the 10th and 11th grade students, and it's basically organized into 4 different levels. So there's the first Dean's List semifinalists, which are your 2 nominees from each team. And then those will move on to compete at the regional level of competition, which if they win, they'll move on to the first Dean's List district championship semifinalists, which they'll compete in the district championship. And then they'll move on to being first Dean's List finalists, which they'll compete at Worlds to become first Dean's List winners. So this is like the overview of the Dean's List criteria. I'm not going to go through every single one, but just know that this is what FIRST is looking for when they're looking for winners for the Dean's List Award. Okay, so the Dean's List Award is divided into 2 big parts per se. The first part is your essay, and the second part is your interview. And basically, what FIRST and the judges are looking for in these 2 things is they want to get to know the candidates because going into everything, these judges have no idea who you are. They don't know what you've done and don't know your accomplishments. And so, in your essay and your interview, you want to compile the most important information and provide the most about yourself that you can to make sure that the judges know the most about you as possible. So how the Dean's List essay works is there's 5 essay questions, and if you click the link and go to, I believe, page 5, yeah, right there. Yeah, so those are the 5 essay questions. Again, I won't go through them all individually, but it's in this document to look at. But yeah, they're consisted of 5 questions, and basically those questions cover all those criteria that I showed you before. And so, yeah, we can go back to the slideshow now. Yeah, and each question has an 800 character limit, and there's also an additional information section at the end with a 500 character limit. So the biggest thing about the essay is you want to provide the most information about yourself as possible, and you want to make sure that you're covering the criteria and you're basically marketing yourself to fit those criteria as best as you can. So, how we like to do our process of writing this essay is we almost treat it like a letter of recommendation. And so we start off with a brag sheet where we have our students fill out this brag sheet of what they've done for FIRST and the team, list their accomplishments and, their contributions. And based on that, a senior member of the team or mentors will then proceed to write the actual Dean's List essay. And based on that first draft of that essay, the students, along with the captains and mentors, will revise that essay and we'll move on to submit it. One of the biggest things that I want to emphasize about writing your essay is utilizing keywords, because sometimes it's kind of hard to remember that between teams and between first, not everyone uses the same terminology. And so, in our team, we might use terms like lead and captain, but in other teams or to first, that might not mean the same thing as it does to us, as it does to them. And so what first actually has is they have a list of keywords that they've organized out for us that basically mean the same universal thing across everything. And so, things like captain or lead or hosted, things like that are just words that first have coin that mean a specific thing and just make it easier for the judges to understand what you've actually done and what your contribution is. And so using those keywords are really, really important to, highlight your accomplishments and just make sure that the judges understand what you've done. Okay. And the other part of your Dean's List Award is the interview. And going into your interview, one thing to remember is that the judges have already read your essay. So, like I said before, we want to introduce the most information as we can to the judges. So we don't want to repeat as much information from your essay. We want to bring in new information and provide more information about yourself in this interview. So we really want to treat it like a second chance to introduce yourself apart from your essay. So how the interview works is the interview lasts around 6 to 10 minutes. And even though a mentor can be present in the room along with the student, only the student is allowed to speak to the judges. So a couple tips for preparing for this interview is obviously you want to practice questions. This is probably the most important part about your dean's practicing for the dean's interview, as it's going to be the core part of your interview itself. And so First actually has a list of sample questions listed out in the document before. I think it's on page 6. But utilizing those, if you guys have previous questions that you guys know popped up, practicing with those questions is really, really good. And just overall making sure that when you get questions, you are, you're ready to prepare, you're ready to answer them confidently, and making sure that you know what to say is just really the most important part. The second thing is you have to know the criteria. Like I said before, the criteria is what the judges are basing everything off of, that's what they're literally judging you on. So knowing what the criteria is and knowing how to fit yourself into those criteria is going to be important into, being successful. And same as the interview, same as the essay, again, utilizing those keywords are also going to be important for highlighting your accomplishment and contributions. And next is going to be an examples list. So what this is basically just a full list of examples of what you've done. So if you've participated in unified robotics, if you've designed a specific part of the robot, if you've been on PIT, maybe you presented for an award. All those things you can compile in a huge list so that basically when you go into your interview, you can pull from that list, a specific example, and you don't have to sit there in the interview trying to think of it. And I found this to be really, really helpful, making sure to organize all these examples into different criteria so that when I'm asked questions based on a certain criteria, I can literally just call back the list and pull an example from the list to answer the questions with. And last thing is just being confident. This sounds really obvious, but really this is the most important thing that you can do in an interview in general. Just making sure that you sound confident and you own your accomplishments is going to go a really long way in your interview.
All right, so the next portion we're going to talk about is impact. So how our team essentially handles impact is because it's such a big award that our team really wants to get. We like to make a plan to make sure that we're really achieving everything we want for this. So we like to plan everything we want to get done before, so we're not scrambling to get things done last minute. So this is essentially how our plan works. So we're just going to run through it with you guys. So once we figure out who our presenters are going to be, we like to pick out a theme for our whole presentation. Now, I know some teams like to just keep the presentation the same as the game. However, one thing we do that's a little bit different is we go through and we find a topic that all the presenters have in common that is also encompassed with the game, like the theme that first has given for the game. So for example, last year, our 3 presenters had come up with the theme of Spotify, and then the games theme was Crescendo, so it just worked really well together. After we've come up with the theme, we like to brainstorm for the presentation. So last year, our three presenters, the subgroups they were in was InReach, Finance, and Awards. And so because of this, we didn't want all three of them to pick up like everything on the team because it would just be a ton of work that they'd have to be putting in. So instead, what we did is like for the InReach and Outreach events that we've done over the past 3 years, we had the InReach member cover all of that just because it'd be easier for her to figure out like what to talk about there than it would be for the finance member to be talking about stuff like that. So it made it a little bit easier on the presenters to talk about something that they've already been experienced with rather than figuring out new stuff to present about. After that, we finalized who would be doing what in the presentation. So really getting down if this question gets asked, who would be answering it, and then who's taking on which part of the presentation. Then we memorized the pitch. This part is just something we had to get done. So after that, we figured out how the visual would be incorporated into the presentation. So I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into this. So the visual for our team was a really big, like we made it out of plastic and like we put vinyl on it and painted it and everything. However, not all teams do this. And there are different teams who do different things. For example, some teams go ahead and make slides and they present that with their presentation. Some teams make trifolds. So there's a various different options that you can do with your impact presentation. However, this is just what our team has found adds value to our presentation. So I'm just going to walk through this one. So one thing for all visuals, whether you're doing what our team does, a trifold or a slide, is you want to make sure that this visual adds value to your presentation. If your visual is sitting in the corner while you're kind of going on about your presentation, there's no point in even having it there because it's not adding any value. You want to kind of have your visual there and walk through it with the visual. So this will just engage the judges and kind of take them along the journey with you. I'm going to show you guys an example of our visual. So this is what our visual looked like. And it was basically just a big phone. And on it, we had opened the Robostangs library. So it was opened onto Spotify. And then these orange plates were like different playlists. And as we walked through our presentation, this would keep moving up to signify the more impact we made on the community. And it showed like the crescendo we were making on the community. It also signified the end of the presentation. And then each of these orange plates looked like this. So it had a play button, a shuffle button, and then each of these were different songs. It took some time, but it definitely added value to our presentation. However, you do not have to do something like this. A slideshow can do just the same thing. So after we made, then the next step we had was to build this, visual. One thing we did was we did not spend more than a week building the visual because if you spend more than a week, you're taking away the time you could have been preparing for your presentation or preparing for supplemental questions. So we did spend about 2 weeks preparing, like figuring out how we were going to plan our visual, but we only spent a week actually like painting things and sticking things on. After we had everything figured out, we finalized the presentation. We presented in front of different mentors and got feedback and everything. And finally, we presented it. Okay. So the next thing is the impact Q&A section. Sorry. So the whole point of the impact Q&A section is to bring up points that weren't exactly covered or a little foggy in the presentation. The questions that the judges will ask on this range from business and build side, but most of the time judges do ask questions on the business side just because most of the presentation is based on the business side. What we found, and this is credited to Frog Force, but what we found that judges usually ask are 3 types of questions: clarify, prove it, and then tell me more. So I'll open up this doc and show you guys what we have. So if you guys want to follow along, it's right here. I can zoom in too. But clarify questions are basically just something you mentioned in your presentation that the judge found a little confusing. These questions you want to spend the least amount of time answering. You just want to clarify it, get in, get out quickly. Prove it questions are something that you said that the judge found like iffy and they don't technically believe you, so they want you to prove it out. A great way to answer these questions are with stats or first definition, just to prove that you know something happened or to prove that your team did something. Now, tell me more questions are the most important ones. These are the ones I'd say you want to spend the most time about because it's something that caught the judge's eye and they want you to explain more about it. This is something briefly mentioned in the presentation, and now the judges want you to expand upon it. So this will give you your team a way to like tell the judges more about what your team has done at this event and things like that. So tell me more questions are something you want to spend a lot more time on. Now, these are the questions that our team had come up with for our presenters. So how we come up with these questions for our presenters is we took the presenter's script and then gave it to a couple people to sit down with the basis of clarify, prove it, and tell me more questions. And we asked them to come up with questions that would fit these 3 themes. From there, we made sure that the presenters, every time we asked them questions, it'd be a new question that they hadn't heard already, because subconsciously they would start framing how they would answer a question. And so we didn't want them to get used to that, because when they were actually presenting on the day of, we knew that they shouldn't expect that they would have the same question that they'd already expected. However, we did do one thing. We asked past impact presenters on our team, and we'd asked them what types of questions they had gotten and they'd seen consecutively had been asked. From there, we had made sure that the impact presenters had been prepared to how they would answer those questions if it was asked in a similar manner, just because we were fairly sure that that question might be asked, and we wanted to make sure that the presenters were ready for if it was asked. So now the impact book. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this is honestly, it's not as important as anything else I've mentioned about impact, but this does add to your presentation, and it's very similar to the visual. If you're unable to make an impact book, another great supplement for impact books are like little business cards that can have a QR code that leads right to your website. It serves as the exact same purpose as an impact book. So there's different ways that you can kind of get to the point of an impact book without actually making one. One good thing about the impact book is it's not only for impact presenters, but it's also very useful for PIT presenters. And in case you guys don't know what PIT presenters are, it's usually one person from the build side of your team and one from the business side. And they're just in the pit answering questions from judges, but we'll go more into pit presenting a little later in the presentation. Our impact book basically just goes through and describes events that we've hosted with statistics, and then it just has pictures with it to kind of make the judge relate more to our team. So I'll show you guys an example of ours. Okay, right here. So we had Steam Carnival, and we have on the day it was hosted, how many students we reached, and we had some pictures to help, show the judges how this event turned out for us. And we have it for almost all the events that we've hosted or helped run or anything like that. It just really helps in showing the judge how we made an impact, because we can talk about it all we want, but having the pictures there really shows the judges how many kids, like how the kids learned and what their experience was there from the faces that they saw. Now, these are just overall tips that we have for you guys. So when you guys are figuring out your presentations or answering questions, you want to be very familiar with the first definitions. These first definitions are like a unified way of everyone knowing what everyone's talking about. So you really want to be familiar with them. For example, if you get asked the question, like, what do you mean you started 5 teams in India? Being able to identify what it means by started and then being able to implement other first definitions to answer that question will help you a ton. We also linked the first definitions for you guys when we send this out, but it basically has the definitions as well as some of them have how to use them in a sentence. So after you guys have come up with your impact script, you want to go through and supplement these words in for some other words, just to make it more like cohesive with the first definitions. But now I'll be handing it off to Opal to talk more about overall tips.
Okay, so building off of what Nishi was talking about with the first definitions, she was mentioning them a lot in the presentation, but they're equally as important for your writing process. So that's going to be your supplementals and your impact essay. You have to keep these in mind while you're writing that essay because it helps judges understand your writing more. A really key part of these words is it gets rid of a barrier of communication and it allows judges to understand exactly what your team has done. It helps prove the validity of your events and your outreach in the eyes of judges and prevents any redundant questions you might not have had previously. We do recommend, as a rule of thumb, trying to categorize every single one of your events into one to three of these words. This is going to be super duper helpful, one, when you're trying to implement them into your presentation, but additionally when you're talking about them. And additionally, this will help you identify areas in which your team is lacking. So for example, this year we went through the first definitions and we tried to analyze what we were lacking in, and we noticed we didn't have a lot of advocacy. So something that we've made a goal of ours this season is to improve upon advocacy within FIRST, which is a FIRST definition. Next, we're going to move into judges' resources.
So the first thing we're going to talk about in judges' resources is the business plan. The business plan is just a big document that allows you to set goals for the next year, and it keeps all of your information in one place, which really helps your PIT presenters because they have an easily accessible document, which allows them to find information in the PIT. It's really, really helpful, but it's not really needed. So I linked 3 links in the slideshow. The first one is the overview of the business plan, and this gives a explanation for the business plan and each part of it. The second link is the first template. I don't know if I would really recommend using exactly this, as it's not really aesthetically pleasing. But and the next part is our personal business plan. We used this last year, and I would say that it helped us a lot. Next, I'll be handing it off to Jasper.
Okay, so I'll talk a little bit more about the technical summary. So this is a resource that can help you guys out when you guys are presenting in the pits to judges or even for your impact. And basically what this is it gives judges a overview of your entire robot, starting from your design, your strategy, and your software. And so if we take a look at our technical summary from the past year, so we start off with showing them a brief, a full design of the robot, and we organize it into, game strategy, design, and software. And basically, we want to make sure that the judges understand how we got to our robot and how our robot works. So if we scroll up to the game strategy part, we're getting there. Okay, yeah, right here. So yeah, what we did is we kind of just compiled what our discussion was at the start of the season, from what we wanted to do, how we wanted our autonomous to work, how we wanted our maneuverability to work, and all that compiled into, what we came up with at the start of the season that influenced our, final robot. And so that leads into, the actual design portion where, you can insert in your specific actual robot design with different subsystems. And in this part, it's really important to get, as deep and as in detail as you can. So putting in a lot of numbers, data is really good. For example, we put in our drive for our swerve. We have different speeds for our motors and whatnot, things like that is really important. And then finally, at the end, we have our software section where we discuss what software features that we used in our robot, starting from autonomous with our paths and IntelliOp as well. And again, this is really, really helpful for the judges to understand how exactly we got to our final robot, because we can talk about it all we want, but again, seeing it in pictures, seeing it in text is going to do so much more for the judges as well.
Okay, our last topic for today is going to be PIT presenting. And so I'll do a little bit of an overall description of it. So first of all, with PIT presenting, it does not impact your impact award. It's only going to help you win team attribute and robot awards. So this means the impact award, which is worth 10 points, will not be impacted by what you say in PIT presenting, and it's also not considered in the judging process for impact. However, it is considered whenever you are trying to win a team attribute award. So your impact is not going to play a role when you're trying to win the team attribute or PIT awards. So obviously it occurs in PIT as with the name, and these aren't planned sessions. So something that I was new to PIT judging this year. And something that I was surprised is you don't have a session, or you don't have a specific time where the judge will come and tell you, hey, you're going to be getting judging now. Basically, how it works is judges will walk around throughout the day, and then they'll come to they have a couple teams like in a list in which they'll come to, but they won't have a specific time which they go to them, which means your presenters need to be prepared at all times. So usually I kind of break down the judging into two portions. You have business judging, meaning they're going to be asking about the business side of of your team. So that's going to be team structure, finance, outreach. They're also going to have build judging, and for that, that's going to be talking about the robot, asking different members about what they do, stuff like that. Usually you will most likely have one session devoted to both. And if the judges are interested in what you have to say, or you're in the running for another award, you may have more than one session for a specific section. Moving into preparation for PIP presenting, there's two kind of portions when you're presenter and you're working towards the competition. That's going to be the preparation, and then you're going to have the presentation, which is happening at the event. For preparation, the first thing you want to consider is the number of presenters your team wants to have. You should always have one designated person in the pit that can answer questions about build and business. That means that person should be there to greet the judge and usually answer questions like, tell me about your team, or tell me about your robot. We recommend you do have at least one build answerer, but as you're in pit, most people in pit can answer questions, and have two business people that can answer questions because usually competitions are pretty long. Secondly, you want to know your stats. We recommend creating a stats sheet that includes information about event numbers, sponsors, diversity on your team, growth, as in numbers at your events, as well as fundraising. And this is because judges will be asking about specifics. This is a conversation that's happening, and it isn't a presentation where you know exactly what information you're going to be giving out. You have no idea what is going to happen when you go into that session, meaning you should be as prepared as possible with statistics. Additionally, knowing your awards is going to be super helpful. That first part that I mentioned in the beginning with the award breakdown and breaking down each piece of criteria, that helps you make sure you have a comprehensive understanding of how all your events fall into the different awards criteria. That way, when you're talking about the things that your team has done, you can be posturing towards certain awards depending on what you want to win. They may ask questions that is quite literally just an awards criteria question. So they may ask, what's something sustainable that your team has done on the build side of it? And if you know about the awards criteria, you know that is a awards criteria for the sustainability award. So knowing which one of your events and actions fall into that is going to be really helpful with helping you create accurate and specific answers. Additionally, you want to prepare for overarching topics. So that's going to be the structure of your team. You should know how leadership works on your team. You should know the numbers on your team. Additionally, you should know sponsors and finances for your team. I know a lot of members aren't typically very knowledgeable in that, but that is fair game when judges are asking questions, and it is quite interesting. So you should know the ins and outs of that, as well as some of your sponsors in name detail. Additionally, you want to know the numbers and the growth of your event. So that's going to be outreach, who you're reaching, your targets for those. And lastly, challenges and issues. Judges will not shy away from asking challenging questions that are going to force you to think on your feet. For example, this year when we were at, I think it was Milford, one of the judges asked us, what was one question that you were hoping you didn't want us to ask? So that type of question falls under the challenges and issues, and that's something you should have a prepared answer for, because if you tend to flounder there, it's not going to reflect well on you or your team. Moving on to the actual preparation portion of the PIP presenting, we do recommend you use any resources that you have available to you. So that's going to be if you have a business plan available, if you have an impact book in the pit, if you have mechanical resources, you can supplement what you're saying with pictures and with text and with statistics, and that will help, one, create more validity for what you're saying. You'll be more believable and more genuine because you can speak confidently about what you're talking about. For example, this year when I was talking about one of my events or a couple events, I'd have page numbers memorized from our impact impact book, and I'd flip to that page and show them a couple pictures from those events. And that just makes the environment much more genuine. Additionally, you have to know that this is not a time limited thing. If you compare this with impact, you have a set time where you're going to be presenting and you have a set time where you're going to be answering questions. Pitt is exactly the opposite. You don't know how long they're going to stay, and you also don't know what time they're going to come, which means you're going to be able to create an organic environment with your judge. And to do that, you don't want to think of it as a presentation, think of it as a conversation. You should not be trying to cram as much information into your time as possible, because if the judges are interested, they will ask more questions about it. So for example, let's say they're asking you about your outreach. Instead of trying to focus on every single event, like all 10 events you guys did this season, try and focus on the 3 most impactful ones. And then from there, the judges will ask you a specific question like, oh, how many kids did you have attend this event? How has your growth been for these 2 events? Stuff like that. Next, and lastly, your presenters need to know details. When a judge asks you a question, you have to be able to answer it, no matter if that's not your role on the team. So that means your presenters have to be prepared with not only all the statistics for what they're going to be talking about, but additionally every single event, every sponsor, that should all be given to them, or they should be compiling a list before the competition. Judges tend to ask clarifying questions because it is a conversation, and you do need to be prepared for that. So for example, at Worlds this year, we had a judge ask about a STEM bond that we took place in, I think, 2 to 3 years ago. And I wasn't on the team when that happened, so I was not very aware of everything that went into it. However, they did ask about that when asking about advocacy, so I was forced to kind of think on the spot. And while that is a good skill to have, it isn't something you want to be forced into doing, because you can easily make a mistake. We're now going to move into our Q&A session. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Okay, so Bill, he asked, how many students do you have on awards, overall business team, and overall team? So usually, I mean, for awards at least, at the moment, we have 3 members. We have me, Hamsi, and Nishi. Typically, awards is a smaller subgroup just because certain things like outreach as well as the build side of the team are going to need more students. We do know that a lot of teams don't have enough members to basically have an entire awards subgroup, which is why it's important for you to be able to modify all of those things, such as that impact presentation, and get multiple students involved in it instead of having just a couple students explicitly and only involved with that. For our overall business team, I'd say we probably have, our team is around 90 members, and we do accept new members every year, but we do have usually a split, but I'd say we have like 35 kids on business and 45 kids on build. So it's a pretty even split. And another question we had was, Jim asked, for members working on impact award presentations and perhaps others, what's the balance of time they're working towards awards versus build/drive tasks? Is awards 5%, 25%, 50%, or more of their time? So I'll give like my perspective on this, and then I'm sure like Dunvi, she was an impact presenter last year, and Jasper can also give their thoughts. Especially, it depends. Like if you are a business person, if you do a lot of business, and then you working with awards is a little bit easier. So for example, last year I was on outreach, meaning I planned outreach events for our team. And then I also did awards. I did pit presenting last year. So for me, I had to find that balance. I had to kind of take some time away from doing my outreach work and moving more into preparing for the competition. But for other people, like if you're on build, you might have to, and especially if you're doing impact, which is more time consuming, you might have to devote more of your time and turn away from other aspects of the team. You guys can feel free to give your guys' perspective on that question.
I think Jasper might have a better answer for this in regards to like spending time with build and business at the same time, since he was our Dean's List candidate as well as our build pit member. So maybe he'll have a better answer for how you can split that time.
Yes. So, I mean, from my perspective, last year I was the Dean's List candidate. I was also the pit presenter, and I was the design lead. So, for working on the robot, see, it kind of worked out well for me because designing the robot mostly happens in the first part of the build season. So, the first maybe 2 to 3 weeks of the build season, I would design the robot. And then, as we got to, closer and closer to competition dates, I could spend more time actually focusing on practicing for, my Dean's interview and PIP presenting. And so I guess for me, it kind of worked out, in my favor. But just in general, for being on build, I think it's good to kind of balance it out almost like a 50-50 because build and business are really equally as important. Like obviously working on the robot is great, that's important, but equally as important is you need to be able to pit present, you need to have that practice answering questions to be able to succeed in your awards. So I would say try to go 50-50. Like if you have 2 meeting times a week, 1 meeting time they can focus on the robot, 1 meeting time they can focus on practicing for awards.
Yeah, and to add to that, impact preparation as well. Like I was an impact presenter last year. It does take a lot of dedication to practicing your pitch and practicing questions. So if you are on both the build and business side, you could take some time in each meeting and maybe spend 30 minutes to an hour with just like practicing some questions, practicing Q&A period, or practicing your pitch with the rest of your presenters. So it's definitely possible. I know there's other teams that have done that. Actually, at our state competition, I did meet one of a presenter who was both on the pit team and impact presenter. So it's definitely possible. But you do have to practice both from early on.
Moving on to the next question from Suzanne. She asked, we are a newer team and still learning. I would like to start having the students work on awards. Where do I start? This is a really good question, and I'm sure a lot of teams are also asking a similar thing. I'm going to put a link to what our basically calendar was for this year. So the first thing we did during the off season to prepare for the award season, which is happening and on season, is we created a plan. When exactly we want to get everything done. So last year we kind of struggled with getting things done on time, especially if you're starting out with awards, it's really, really helpful to think about, hey, when do I want to have certain things done? So for example, for impact, you're going to be thinking, okay, we first have to get a couple students. So I would definitely recommend maybe having 3 students if you can, along with a mentor, and maybe having them map out what you want your season to look like. So, hey, who wants to be making our business plan? Who wants to be helping craft our presentation? Who wants to help choose our presenters? Like those are all questions that can be answered throughout your calendar. And once you've basically set that outline up for the rest of the year, you can basically bring a various amount of number of students to help achieve different tasks. So for us, because we only have like 3 students, but we do have 3 students that are wholly dedicated to awards, we do keep it within there. But if you can't dedicate specific students to awards, you can always have a bigger group and have everyone do different things. That link should be helpful. I made it anyone with a link can access it, and I'm gonna go to it right now. And basically, it has in June, basically we created our awards criteria notes. So that means taking notes on all our criteria that pit awards and seeing how we fit into there and where we need to improve. July, we started creating our impact video. We started finding our outlines for our business plan and our impact book. Just as an off note, really important if you're starting out as a team, making resources that can be utilized for many years to come. So for example, this year for our business plan and our impact book, we're not creating new resources. We're reusing the ones we used last year and changing our statistics and changing some of our photos and examples. But overall, we're creating an outline that can be used for multiple years to come. So often the first year is going to be the hardest because you have to create those resources from scratch. But making those really high quality this year is going to help you succeed a lot more in the next year. So yeah.
Another thing to add, you don't have to start off with all of these things. A lot of the things we've mentioned, like our business plan and impact book, not all of those are necessary to have a functioning and have a good awards team. So you can start off small, like the business cards that Nishi was mentioning. That's a great way to start and build off from there. So you don't have to do everything at once in your first year. And it's kind of difficult to have a bunch of things like essays and all of this going on. So starting small with the things that aren't as necessary and then building from that point is a great way to start.
And then a question. Oh, okay. A question that we had earlier was, is there any place to find those keywords? I think this was referencing the Dean's portion of the presentation. But yeah, I forgot to mention it, so sorry guys. But if we open up here, I'll send it in the chat as well. If we, this is the first Dean's List Awards Guide. And if we go to, I believe, page 15 of that document, there is a whole list of words, keywords, and definitions for those words that you guys can utilize in your Dean's List essays and interviews. And yeah, so that's where you guys can find those keywords.
Okay, it looks like I accidentally sent the link to the wrong I didn't send it to everyone. Oh, so I'm gonna send that to everyone in the chat, everyone. And you guys should be able to access it, and you guys can modify it however you want. Additionally, one more thing we wanted to just mention to everyone who attended the seminar or anyone who sees this on YouTube is a really helpful thing with impact as well as PIP presenting is being able to practice with other teams and other people. So we have a slide at the end of our presentation that has our contact information. But if you guys have any questions about specifics of the awards process, whether that's essays, supplemental questions, or Q&A, you guys can just reach out to us on that email. And we have mentors that have been on the team and helping with awards for like 14 years. So you guys can reach out to us for that. And also we'd be thrilled to do like an impact run through with you guys. That's something that we did this year is we ran through our impact presentation multiple times with different people. So that might have been guest judges, or that might have been different mentors or people from different teams. So if that's something you guys are interested in doing this season, just reach out to us at team@Robostangs, and we would love to coordinate that with you guys. So yeah, just let us know. We currently have, oh wait, we do have another question. If we want to put, Suzanne asked, if we want to put an effort into, say, a Team Spirit Award, how do you let first know that is what you've worked on? So, basically, what I would recommend for that is go back to your drawing board, right? And I would recommend going to the first website and finding the awards criteria, then making a list of every single thing you've done that pertains to that specific criteria. Because a lot of winning awards is not telling judges what you've done or like telling them you should win an award. It's showing them you should win that award. So everything you're saying in PIT, like at the end of it, you should have said enough that qualifies you for that award. So sometimes judges will ask like specific questions like, oh, like what did you guys do to show this team spirit? But a lot of times they won't. And so that means you're gonna have to utilize those times in questioning, or like that's times in question and answer periods when they ask, is there anything else you guys want to share with me? That happens a lot. I think when I did presenting this year, that happened around 3 times, and every single time we never said, oh no, we're good. We always kept the conversation going, because the more they know about your team and the more they're interested with what you have to say, the more likely they are to give you an award. So during those times, it's going to be super helpful for you to mention those specific events and then kind of imply the criteria in which it meets. So that would be something I would do for trying to win a specific award. Another, I think JT said FRC 359 also typically hosts impact exchanges. They're very helpful and beneficial. Like that's going to be super duper helpful. Whether it's going to be any team that you can find, you should be exchanging and practicing your presentation in front of as many people as possible, and it's just going to positively impact you. Ms. Sandhu asked, do you change your presentation/visual after competitions, after seeing other teams' visuals or presentations? I wasn't on Impact last year, but Tanvi was. So do you want this question, Tanvi?
Sure. So one thing that we do with like solidifying our theme early on is you want to have kind of a middle line with how you take feedback and how you take like other people's visuals. So you want to be confident in whatever you're presenting and what you've practiced on. You don't want it to waver in the middle, but after competitions, you do want to take the feedback into more in the actual presentation and question period aspect rather than spending time to change too much on the visual. You want to kind of move forward. Like the visual will be done and ready after that week. And then you don't want to spend too much time worrying about like the smaller things on the visual. You want it to be working and move on to how you can answer questions, how you can pitch your presentation better, how you can utilize those keywords into your presentation. You want to be making sure all of your points are coming across like when you're actually speaking. So that might be a better way to spend the time because it is very limited between competitions. So you want to make sure you're utilizing it as much as you can. Compliment. How important might a complimentary video be to an impact award? So I'm not sure. Maybe you could clarify this question, what you meant by complimentary video.
I think
Cindy,
you meant the impact video.
yeah, I think I can take this one. So
Okay, go ahead.
the impact video is honestly, I think one of the things you should spend the least time worrying about, especially as a new team. Our team focuses on it since we have the team, we have the amount of people we need and the resources in order to film this video. However, it doesn't get shown to the judges. It's just something that other teams are able to see how your team has like it's like for other teams to be able to see like why your team might have won impact, but it doesn't get shown to judges. So out of everything that was mentioned today in the impact section of the presentation, that's something you should honestly worry about the least. It's honestly one of the least important things to worry about.
But it is like a really fun thing for your team to do. Our team doesn't treat it as like an awards thing per se, but like for example, like 2 years ago, we just had a couple students who were really interested in making a video. They just like made a music video with like lyrics that kind of corresponded to what we've done. So you can definitely use it as like a team bonding opportunity, or like it's really just to show people when you get to that stage, like if you hopefully win, when your team is celebrating, you're gonna have that video playing in the background. So that's like the usage of it.
One thing that my team has done in the past is create a book and grab some binders of information that we have and bring it to the judges in the impact interview room, hand it to them. Now, whether they look through it, whether they don't, I'm not really sure. But it's nice to have that supplemental information that you can hand them. And you always get that back from typically pit admin at the end of the day.
Does anyone else have anything they want to share? Like that's super helpful, especially like the pit resources, you always get them back. And usually the judges will look through them. So that's a pretty useful thing to bring to competitions.
Thank you so much for attending. Um, yeah.